So now coming to the halophytic plants, okay, the ecological adaptations of halophytes. Now before we start with the adaptation, let us understand what are halophyte plants. Now these plants, they are special type of plants which can grow on soils with high concentration of salt, okay, with high concentration of salts. So you have studied xerophytic plants are those plants which grow on the dry condition, where there is on dry condition, okay, on dry soils where there is less water. And we have studied hydrophytes which can grow in water. And here we come to the third category of plants, that is halophytes, those which can grow on soils with high concentration of salts. So here it is given examples of rhizophora, then Soneraceae and Avicennia. So these are the three examples of halophytic plants. Now that is why halophytes, they are usually found near the seashores and estuaries. And the soils here, they are physically wet, but you can see that they are physiologically dry. Why? Because the plant, although the soil is wet, the plants, they cannot use the salt water directly, they cannot absorb the salt water directly. Instead, they require filtration of salt using various physiological processes. That is why the soils where these plants is growing, they are physically wet, but they are physiologically dry, as the plants, they have to filter the water, the salt, using physiological processes. And this vegetation is known as mangrove forests. Here what happened, here in halophytes, what happened, the some of the halophyte plants, they require some salt, okay. A few halophytes, they can grow in those areas, in those habitat where there is a concentrated salt, and they can withstand the saturated salt, high saturated salt concentration. Whereas some salt, they are extremely toxic to most of the halophytes at even a relatively low soil water concentration. Okay, they have a deleterious effect on the structure of the structure as well as the metabolism of the plants. Hence, these plants, the halophytic plants, they evolve various mechanisms, okay, for their, they have evolved various mechanisms for their survival in such conditions, in such habitats with high salt concentration. So these type of plants, they are known as halophytes. Remember, halophytic plants, they grow on soils which have a high concentration of salt, and they grow in well saturated area with water, okay, but they cannot avail the water because of high concentration of salts in the soil. Thus they are adapted to the soil, and they occur naturally in environments ranging from maritime estuaries to remnant salt lakes in arid zones. And here the vascular halophytes comprises of herbs, shrubs and trees, and they are widely distributed among many families of flowering plants such as Rhizophораceae, then Lytharaceae, Acanthaceae, Poaceae, okay, uh, many families of flowering plants fall under these categories, okay, of plants, that is the halophyte. So now we are going to discuss on the I am not going to give you the classification of halophytes, as it is not there, it is not mentioned in your syllabus also, okay. There are many different classes of these halophytes. All right, there are true halophytes, then zero halophytes, and many groups and subgroups, okay. The here the classification is quite lengthy, so I'm not going to discuss on the classification. Directly we'll come to the different adaptations, how these plants they are able to adapt themselves morphologically, anatomically, as well as physiologically. Okay, girls, let us start with the morphological adaptation in the halophytes. Now, here the morphological adaptations key in the roots, the leaves, the stems of these halophytic plants. First, let us talk about the roots. Now, the first morphological adaptation is the root aeration devices. Now, here the halophytes they are equipped with some form of root aeration device, okay, that help them to sustain oxidative metabolism, that provide energy dependent exclusion of salts, okay, in an anaerobic root zone. And these devices it include the slit roots, cone roots, root buttresses, and the pneumatophores. So four types, okay. These four types of roots can be seen in halophytic plants, that is the slit roots, cone roots, root buttresses, and the pneumatophores. And all these organs they have accompanying parenchyma to serve a common purpose, that is root gas exchange, okay, so the exchange of gas through roots. Now coming to the first type here, as you can see, these are referred to the slit roots, okay, whereas these type of roots in halophytic plants they are referred to as the cone roots. Now the slit roots or the cone roots they are developed from efficient anchorage in muddy sandy soil, and those roots develop from the aerial branches. As you can see, these roots they develop from the aerial branches of the stem. All right, so these roots they develop from the aerial branches and they grow downwardly. As you can see here, they grow downwardly and penetrate the deep strata of the soil, and they also help in root gas exchange. Okay, so both these two types of roots, the cone roots as well as the slit roots, they grow downwardly and they penetrate the deep strata of the soil and help in root gas exchange. Now the second type of root that we can see, they are root buttresses. Now in one of the species of halophytes, that is Xylocarpus, okay, Xylocarpus and Heritaria species, okay, a large number of adventitious roots are formed, and these large adventitious root buttresses they develop from the basal part, okay, they develop from the basal part of the tree trunks that provide sufficient support to the plant for efficient anchorage to the muddy soil, and they also help in root gas exchange. So in Heritaria as well as Xylocarpus, we can find these types of adventitious root buttresses. And another type of roots that can be found in plants, they are known as the pneumatophores. Now, as the roots of Avicennia species and Heritaria species, they do not get sufficient aeration. So these plants, they develop special type of negatively geotropic uh, peg-like roots. Okay, negatively geotropic. Why? Because as you know that the roots they grow downward, right? They grow downward in response to gravity. But in case of these roots, they are negatively geotropic because they grow upward. Okay, from the roots they grow upward, and they are referred to as the pneumatophores, or remember that these pneumatophores they are also referred to as the breeding roots. Okay, the breeding roots to compensate the lack of soil aeration. and these roots they develop from the underground roots only, but they become pointed with numerous lenticles. Okay, there are numerous lenticles. They become pointed with numerous lenticles or nematodes on their surface, and the internal part of these roots possess prominent parenchyma, enclosing a large air cavities in order to facilitate the exchange of gases. Okay, so in some species of halophytes such as Bruguiera, the horizontal roots, okay, let me show you. All right, it's this one only. These horizontal roots, they some of the horizontal roots in some species, I could not show you. I don't have the diagram right now, but in some species of Bruguiera, okay, these type of halophytes, they have the horizontal roots at the, and these horizontal roots, they at first they grow above the surface, and they bend downwardly, okay, to penetrate deep into the muddy soil, forming knee-like structures. Next time, if I will try to show you the diagram, okay, where these types of roots can be found. They at first you will see they grow above the surface, but then they bend downwardly, thus forming knee-like structures. And these roots, they also help to maintain gaseous exchange through aerial surfaces that contain numerous lenticles. So the gaseous exchange, it takes place through the lenticles. Okay, so now coming to the, so those are the four different types of roots that can be found in the halophytic plants. And coming to the stem, so the stems of many halophytes such as Suera species and Salicornia species, they develop succulents. Okay, and these succulents is directly correlated with salt tolerance. Okay, so in order to tolerate the high salt content of the soil, they develop these succulent, they are able to form these succulent stems. And the salinity, it inhibits cell division, and it also stimulates cell elongation. Thus, in this way, it increases the ability of plant to survive in high saline habitats. And the leaves as well in halophytes, they leaves are thick succulent and are often glassy in appearance. Okay, why? And also these the leaves in halophytes, they are covered with thick cuticle and densely coated with trichomes. So what are trichomes? Trichomes are the hairs, okay, which cover the leaves. So these leaves in most of the halophytic plants, they are covered with thick cuticle and they are densely coated, as you can see here, small hairs, that is the trichomes of various types. These the presence of these trichomes in the leaf succulent plants, they help the plant to withstand salinity, and these trichomes of various types, they secrete salt from the leaves. Okay, hence crystalline whitish salts occur on the surface of leaves of many mangroves. Uh, you can see here in this diagram, let me show you. See, these are the whitish salt which appear on the leaves, and many whitish appearance, these are nothing but they are the crystalline whitish salt. You can see clearly in this diagram. The trichomes, they help in they help to secrete the salt. Okay, they help to secrete the salt, and these salt, that is why they occur on the surface of the leaf, and here also you can see clearly. So that is the function of these trichomes. And the leaves of one of the of the this halophytic plants, they are densely coated with trichomes and they have silvery reflectance. Okay, they also have silvery reflectance, and this silvery reflectance, it helps prevent some UV rays to reach the leaf tissues. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Now, how the leaves they of the halophytic plants, how they are able to adapt to different salinity condition of their habitat. Okay, so thus the leaves in this way they are these plants they are able to adapt in these kind of habitats. You can see that the roots are of different types. Okay, we have seen that the root they have these they are able to exchange the gas through the roots, and the stems also they are, we have seen that the stems of many halophytes they develop succulents, which is directly correlated with salt tolerance. And we have the leaves, they are thick succulent, often glassy in appearance. They are covered with thick cuticle. They are densely coated with trichomes, that is the hairs, and they are also have this silvery reflectance which can reflect the UV rays, so in order to prevent the UV rays to reach the leaf tissues. So next, we are going to talk about the dispersal of roots and seeds. Okay, in these halophytic plants, we are going to talk about the dispersal of fruits and seeds. Now, fruits and seeds of mangrove plants, they are light in weight and having a number of air chambers in their wall. Okay, so the fruits and the seeds they have a number of air chambers, hence the fruits, seeds or seedlings they can float in water and they can disperse to far distant places through water current. So just remember that these fruits and seeds of halophytic plants they have many air chambers which help them to float in water and disperse to a far distance with the help of water current. And here I will show you the example, this plant, this grass Spinifex corosa. It is a literal grass which grow in sandy saline seashore, and it shows a unique fruit dispersal mechanism. Okay, this the actually the female inflorescence of this grass, it consists of many spikelets. You can see here many spikelets, and the its female inflorescence, it consists of many spikelets and it becomes spherical. And with seeds maturity, the spherical and hairy inflorescence, it gets detached from the plant and it trails in the sandy soil. Okay, it trails in the sandy soil through its stiff bracteoral bristles, dropping the seeds at places. And ultimately, the inflorescence with the remaining fruits is buried in the sandy soil. And the next adaptation that we are going to talk is vivipary. Now, many wetland halophytes, such as the Rhizophora species and many other species, okay, they carry adaptive reproductive feature that enable their propagation and establishment in waterlogged saline condition or saline sediments. Now, viviparous germination is a unique feature of these halophytic plants. Here, actually, what happened, the seeds it begin to germinate when the fruit is still attached to the parental tree. So clearly you can see in this picture that the seed is still attached to the parental tree, but it starts to germinate. All right, so you can see, I will show you many other different pictures here. You can see in this case as well, the seeds already starts to germinate while still attaching to the plant. Now even here you can see clearly in this diagram that this it already germinate, the seed already germinate, but it is still attaching to the parent tree. And the radicle of the seed, you can see here this green part. Okay, this radicle, it comes out and it becomes massive. As you can see, it becomes massive and tapering. You can see here it is tapering. When the major seed it gets detached from the parent plant, it falls vertically. All right, it falls this way, vertically down due to this massive radicle, and it finally gets embedded in the muddy soil. Thus, the development of a new tree it begins. And because of this habit, the halophytes they develop thick, impenetrable forests wherever they grow. Because of this vivipary which occur in these halophytic plants. And if seedlings fall in deep water, it will float vertically on the surface of water, pointing the hypocotyl downwards, and on reaching the shallow water, this radicle it will get embedded in the soft mud, and the embryo starts growing very rapidly. Thus vivipary it is, you can say it is an adaptive feature of the halophytic plants that enable them to avoid the deleterious effect of salinity on seed germination. Now suppose seed germination occur after when the seeds it gets detached from the plant. So in this way the salinity of the soil or the water where they grow it will affect seed germination. So in this way these types of plants they show this vivipary, that means the seeds they germinate when they are still attached to the parent plant, and later on with the they will a massive radicle will grow, and it is also tapering, and when the plant it finally gets it will get detached from the when the seed is mature enough, it will get detached from the parent plant, it will fall vertically downward due to this massive radicle. All right, and it will finally gets embedded in the muddy soil, and it will finally starts to grow. So these are some of the morphological adaptations that you can see in the halophytic plants. Okay, next we will talk about this anatomical adaptation. All right, so the anatomical adaptation of halophytes it reveals a number of xerophytic features in them. So they somehow has these characteristic features of xerophytes. We have already studied the xerophytic plants, and we have seen the different anatomical adaptation in xerophytic plants just in the last class itself. So even the halophytes they show a number of anatomical adaptation which are similar to the xerophytic plants. And the first adaptation is the presence of thick epidermis and the sunken stomata. Alright, so the epidermis here in the plants, in the leaves and the stems, alright, the internal morphology, if you take a look at the TS section of the leaves and the stems, you will find that the leaf epidermis is very thick and highly cuticularized. Okay, it is covered with a thick layer of cuticle, as you can see in this diagram. And the leaf epidermis, the stomata also, they are less frequent or they are sunken. You know that the sunken stomata are those stomata, they are also known as hidden stomata, right? The stomata which are not directly exposed to the surface, they are present in a small pit, and they protect the escaping water vapor from the air current, thereby decreasing the water loss from the leaves. So the presence of these sunken stomata in the isobilateral leaves can be seen because here the leaves may be dorsiventral, that is, the two surface of the leaf they differ from each other in appearance as well as structure, or the leaves may be isobilateral, meaning they are similar in appearance the on both sides. So in isobilateral leaves, the stomata they are usually sunken, while they are abundant in case of dorsiventral leaves. they are abundant. Okay, the stomata are present in abundance, but they are present in the lower epidermis of the dorsiventral leaves. So that is why they are referred to as the sunken stomata, as they are not much exposed to direct sunlight, just like the desert plants of the xerophyte. So this is one of the xerophytic characters that can be also seen in this halophytic plants. Next, the second characters which is similar to the xerophytes is the presence of a wax layer in aerial parts. So if you remember the wax layer, it helps in the retaining the in to prevent the escaping of water. So here also the aerial parts of the plants, they are covered with waxy layer. Alright, in addition to this thick cuticle, there is a waxy layer on top of the cuticle to prevent the water loss as well as to prevent seawater droplets from reaching the live tissue of the leaves. So the entering of the preventing the entering of seawater droplets the and to prevent the water loss from the leaves. Okay, so that is the function of the waxy layer which is present in these aerial parts of the halophytic plants. And next we have the presence of the secretory substances in the leaves as well as the stems. Now the stems and leaves, they are often with abundance of mucilage cells, and also the epidermal cells, it contain a large quantity of tannins. Right, it contains a large quantity of tannins. Okay, you can see the tannin cell here, and also the oil, the the oil droplets. Okay, so excess of tannin cells and oil droplets are present in the epidermal cells. And salinity, it causes extensive lignification of the stele. And we know that lignification, they become the deposition of lignins. Okay, they become woody, or they become wood or woody. So you can see here in this diagram the presence of these let me show you the diagram. Okay, this one, you can see in this diagram the presence of many oil drops as well as the tannin cells in case of both the stem and the leaves of these halophytic plants. And we have the ion excretion, sorry, the excretion of ions by the salt glands and the salt bladders. So the salt glands, let me show you in this picture here in this diagram. So the salt glands, they occur in many halophytic families of both dicots and monocots, and these glands, they are made up of several specialized cells situated in slight depression of the leaf epidermis, and they are usually covered by a cuticle. Okay, you can see this one blue in color, it is a cuticle. So they are covered with cuticle, and these salt glands, they consist of 2 to 4 collecting cells. All right, so here in this case you can see these yellow in color, there are 2 collecting cells, but some other species, they may have 4 collecting cells, and these collecting cells, they are situated adjacent to the mesophyll, a stalk cell, and 8 to 12 secretory cells. Okay, so there are 8 to 12 secretory cells, and these cells, they discharge the salt through the pore. Okay, so this is, you can see here, it is a salt excreting pore. So the salt are excreted through the pore in this cuticle. All right, so the salt excretion, it actually requires energy, so sunlight energy, thus it drops to a very low rate during darkness. And this species Avicennia marina, okay, this halophytic plant Avicennia, it excretes as much as half the salt reaching the leaves, while another species halophytic plant Aegiceras, it excretes an even higher salt concentration reaching their leaves. So these salt glands of halophytic monocots, they are structurally simpler than those of dicots. Okay, so uh, their structure is much simpler as compared the structure of the salt glands of the monocot plants. They are simpler as compared to those of the dicot plant, and they usually consist of just two cells, and they are capable of high rates of excretion of salt excretion. Thus these salt glands, they are bound to be important devices for the management of salt loads of halophytic plants. So the next one we are talking here is the salt bladders. Now you can see here in these many salt bladders, all right, these one which are transparent in color, here you can see, all right, many salt bladders as you can see here. These salt bladders, they are confined to halophytic members of the family Chenopodacea, all right, such as Artiplex species. Now the salt bladders, they are nothing but they are the epidermal hair cells. Those epidermal hair cells, they have been modified to form salt bladders, and these salt bladders, they actually consist of two cells, right, a stalk cell and a bladder cell, and they are covered by a cuticle which is impermeable to both water and salt. So the stalk cell, it shifts ions from the mesophyll cell to the bladder cell, where salts build up to extremely high concentrations, all right, in these bladders. And thus these bladder cells, they will expand enormously and may reach a final diameter. Okay, each of these bladder cells, they will expand and may reach a final diameter of 200 micrometer due to the extremely high concentration of salts, which eventually burst. Right? It will eventually burst, thus discharging the salt onto the leaf surface. Thus, you can see here that these salt, they are formed on the surface of the leaves. All right, through the what to say the after these salt bladders, they burst, they will discharge the salt onto the leaf surface. So these are some of the anatomical adaptations in the halophytic plants. That is the presence of thick epidermis, sunken stomata, then presence of wax layers in both the stems and the leaves, then the presence of secretory substances, then ion excretion by salt glands as well as the salt bladders. And the last part is the succulents. Okay, so succulents or the fleshiness. This succulents or the fleshiness, it occurs in numbers of halophytic uh, plant species, all right, such as the sesuvium, then batis, and many other species. Okay, so thick and fleshy leaves, they contain a large and highly vacuolated cells. Let me show you the diagram. Okay, so sorry, the diagram is not very clear here. The succulents or the fleshiness, it occurs in a number of halophytic species, all right. In the halophytic plants, thick and fleshy leaves, they contain large and highly vacuolated cells. So that means the cells, most of the cells, they contain vacuoles, and succulence is a feature of dicots, showing an increase in length of the palisade cells. So the palisade tissue, which you can see here in dicot plant, these palisade tissue, the palisade cells, this one. Okay, so these palisade tissue, they increase in length, they increase in length, and also the spongy mesophyll cells. All right, the spongy tissue also, they increase in diameter. Now also you can see here the development of an extra layer of cells. So in halophytic plants, all right, in halophytic plants, this is the VS section of the leaf, all right, where you can see there is an increase in length of palisade cells, increase in diameter of spongy mesophyll cells, or the development of an extra layer of cells. And the thick and fleshy leaves, they contain large and highly vacuolated cells. Now, for example, the leaf of Artiplex species, Artiplex, which is a halophytic plant, they become double in thickness when grow in high salinity. All right, they become double in thickness, and when these larger cells, they can store more salt. So by depositing ions of salt in the vacuole, the toxicity is partitioned from the cytoplasm and organelles of the cell. Now, succulents, it offers additional storage of the incoming salts. So, as the salts are being absorbed by the plants, all right, they get stored in these vacuoles, thus alleviating the impact on other cytoplasmic compartments. So, the toxicity is uh, reduced. Okay, they are not, they are preventing from becoming toxic to other cytoplasmic compartments. Why? Because they are retained, they are being stored in these uh, compartments or in these vacuoles. Sorry, they are being stored in these vacuoles, all right, the salt. So succulents, it offers additional storage of the incoming salts, thus alleviating the impact on cytoplasmic compartments, and thus succulents used to increase the water content within large vacuoles to minimize the toxicity of the salt. So these are some of the uh, anatomical adaptations in halophytic plants. I will continue with this physiological adaptations in halophytic plants. So in halophytes, so if you remember in morphological adaptation, we have different types of roots present in these mangrove trees, and the succulents of the stem and the leaves, and the dispersal of fruits and seeds. Then also we have studied vivipary, where these halophytic plants, okay, the seed germination is a unique viviparous germination, where the germination of the seed, it happens when the seed is still attached to the parental tree. So that is also vivipary is also one of the uh, morphological adaptation of these halophytic plants. And we have also studied anatomical adaptation, where we have studied the presence of thick epidermis, sunken stomata, then the presence of those salt glands as well as salt bladders in these halophytes. And so today we are going to discuss on the physiological adaptation. Actually, in this physiological adaptation, there are different adaptations again of these halophytic plants. Now, the first one that you see here is high osmotic concentration of the cell sap. Now, why the cell sap, it has a high osmotic concentration in these plants? Because the halophytes, they accumulate a high concentration, you can see here, high concentration of sodium and chloride ions. Okay, despite their potential toxicity to the plants, these halophytic plants, they accumulate very high concentration of these two ions, that is sodium and chloride ions. And accumulation of these solutes within the vacuoles and other osmotic compartments of the plant, it raises the osmotic pressure. Okay, it is due to this reason that the plants, they accumulate high concentration of solutes in order to raise the osmotic pressure. So thus the halophytes, they have cell sap concentration at much higher level than the surrounding soil. In that way they are able to absorb water from the sea or the surrounding soil. Okay, in this way, due to the increase solute concentration, we know that osmotic concentration, it occurs when the water will always flow from a low solute concentration to a high solute concentration. So when the concentration of these solutes are very high inside the cell, so the water will move from outside to the inside of the cell. So in this way, due to the accumulation of these solute high solute concentration in the cell sap, these plants, they are able to absorb water from the sea or the surrounding soil. And this prime adaptive feature, it enables them to absorb water from the sea, without which they would not survive, because we know that water is too saline. So how they are able to absorb the water? Because the osmotic concentration, the osmotic pressure, it raises, okay, in these plants, because they can accumulate high concentration of solutes. So hence the halophytes, including marine plants, they have 12 times higher osmotic concentration of cell sap than the ordinary land plants. Now the second feature, adaptive feature, is escape inhibition of germination in salt stress. Now you have already studied uh, in morphological adaptation, we have already discussed on vivipary, right, where the seed germination, it takes place when the seed is still attached to the parental tree. But many halophytes, they have evolved mechanism to escape the toxicity during seed germination. Now how? They shed their seeds, and subsequently the salinity of the soil containing the seed, it becomes lowered. Okay, this salinity, it becomes lowered. Why? Due to substantial rains. So in this way, these halophytic plants, they are able to shed their seeds in the soil itself. And when they shed their seeds, the salinity of the soil, it becomes lower due to substantial rains. For example, this species Artiplex, they retain their seeds in bracts having high levels of salinity. So we know when the soil is too saline, these seeds, they will not be able to germinate, because this will affect seed germination. But through hydration, okay, through this substantial rains, the salt concentration in these bracts, it becomes higher. And when it becomes too high, it can even exceed 500 millimeter, inhibiting germination. I told you just now that when the surrounding is too saline, it will inhibit germination. Okay, the seeds will not be able to germinate. But through the substantial rains, the salts, they are leached out from the bracts, and they generate a favorable seed bed having low salinity. Okay, so in this way, the shed seeds, they can absorb water and they can germinate. So this is another adaptive features in these plants. Now the third adaptive features in halophytes is the increased carbon dioxide concentration mechanism. Now in some halophytes, you can see here, like Spartinia anglica, the carbon dioxide concentration around rubisco to an they increase the carbon dioxide concentration around rubisco to enhance the photosynthetic rate through carbon 4 metabolism. Now we know that this rubisco, I hope you must have heard about this enzyme, you studied with Miss this carbon cycle. So this rubisco is one of the important enzyme in the first step of carbon fixation cycle, okay, where the plants and other photosynthetic organisms, they fix the atmospheric carbon dioxide and converted this carbon dioxide into more high energy molecules such as glucose. So Rubisco also is one of the main enzyme which involve in carbon fixation. So in these halophytes, this carbon 4 cycle, it has been observed, and they what they study, what they found out, that these halophytes, they are able to increase the carbon dioxide concentration around this enzyme rubisco. So in this way they can enhance the photosynthetic rate. Okay, and the last the physiological adaptation, that adaptive features that we can see in these halophytic plants is the organic solutes as metabolic protectants. How? Now, regulation of leaf salts, we have seen that in how the salts, they are formed in the leaves, on the surface of the leaves, how they are uh, how the salts, they have been taken out from the leaves. Okay, so this regulation of leaf salts, because we know that the salt, it is very toxic to the organs, to the organs of the plant, so they have to take out this salt. So this regulation of leaf salts is important because enzymes of halophytes, they are very sensitive to salts. So you know that the water is very saline, and when they absorb the water, the high salinity water, the surrounding water, when they absorb, so that salt, they are very toxic to the plant because they can disrupt the enzyme activity. So the enzymes of halophytes, they are very sensitive to the salts, and most halophytes, they synthesize and they store certain organic molecules called compatible solutes. So remember, this is another adaptive features. The halophytic plants, they store and they synthesize these organic molecules known as compatible solutes, and these compatible solutes, they actually help to prevent the they actually prevent the they have a protective function, we can say. They protect the enzymes in the cell, okay, where there is high salt concentration. Now you know, when the plant absorbs the water with high salt concentration, so presence of these compatible solutes inside the cell, it helps to protect the function of the enzymes in that particular cell. So just remember, the fourth type of adaptive features in halophytic plants is that they are able to synthesize and to store these organic solutes, or the compatible solutes, inside the cell. And these organic solutes, okay, the low molecular weight organic compounds, also known as osmolytes, okay. So these osmolytes, they have a protective function for the enzyme in the cell containing high salt concentration. And of course, these osmolytes, not only the function is not only to protect the function of the enzyme in the cell, but also they have many other properties, okay, many other functions, such as removing the radical oxygen, scavenging the radical oxygen, which can be harmful for the internal organs of the plant, the internal cell, and also stabilizing the membrane process, then modifying the redox potential of the cells, and so many other properties. Okay, for example, I will show you here this one, glycine betaine. Okay, it prevents the inhibition of enzyme activity by sodium chloride, or it may stabilize the oxygen evolving complex of photosystem 2 against the inhibitory effects of salts. So you can see that they have other functions, and but their main function is to They have a protective function for the enzymes in the cell containing high salt concentration. So in this way, these halophytic plants, they are able to adapt themselves in the environment where there is high salt concentration.